You know, we had been hearing rumors and hearing stories about human trafficking and about underage girls from a lot of the folks that I know in law enforcement, saying that number one, prostitution in North Dakota is way up, but there's something also kind of nefarious. You know, not that that's not heinous enough, but something very nefarious, and a lot of concern about Backpage, a lot of concern about girls being moved across state lines. And so when I came to the Senate, I was assigned on the Homeland Security Committee, and Senator Carper, who's the chair, asked each one of us, what are you most interested in? And I said, well, I'm interested in human trafficking. And it just so happened Jeff Chiesa, who was a former senator from New Jersey, where they had the Super Bowl, had the same concern. And so Senator Carper did a very large hearing where people came in and talked not only about sex trafficking, but labor trafficking and what was being done in various states. And my witnesses were folks that you met in Minnesota, these wonderful women who work with Native American women who are in recovery from that kind of abuse. And they came in and really opened up eyes that this isn't just, you know, containers of women from Mexico or China. These are many times underprivileged American citizens who are being trafficked, and that this is something we need a multilateral, a multi-disciplined approach to, that we can't just deal with this through law enforcement. But for me, and as a former Attorney General, law enforcement's always the first step, to criminalize the behavior, to really create consequences for people who perpetrate this crime, but then also help people into recovery. And that's really what we've been working on, is safe harbor to get better prosecution, but also look at ways that we can help people recover from that kind of abuse.
Well, in my case, as a prosecutor for 8 years, we would have cases involving sex rings come into the office. And the treatment of the victims in the cases, they were often handled by the city attorney's office because they were misdemeanors, prostitution, and sometimes they were very young girls. Our focus was on the people running the rings. But over time you realize that a lot of times the victims in the case, the prostitutes would recant, they would change their story, they would say no, they were scared of the guy that was the pimp. And pretty soon you realize this isn't working very well. We're not really, as a country, going after the people that are really doing these crimes. And so over time, Minnesota started looking at something called safe harbor, which meant that for younger girls or boys, if they were victims of these crimes, that they weren't being the ones prosecuted, because the only way you're going to be able to build a case against a pimp, someone running a sex trafficking ring, is if you have a victim who's really able to tell the whole story. And that's what we've done in Minnesota. We brought together, our state legislators did an incredible job, Sandy Pappas and others, in leading an effort to get a bill passed called, one of the first in the country. There's about a dozen states that do this now, safe harbor, so you don't prosecute the younger victims of these types of crimes. That in turn gave us tools to be able to go after the people who are running these rings. We've also taken some unique approaches to Johns in the people who are buying the sex in St. Paul. One of the women who started a group that's called Breaking Free, that really goes after trying to help women who are in prostitution, actually teaches what she calls a John school, and she is one tough woman. And so when these guys get in trouble, one part of their sentence is they have to go to John school, and they have to learn about the ramifications of their crime and all the lives that they hurt. So we've taken a pretty good approach, and it's led to 40-year sentences and some really good results against people running the rings. And so the idea is to bring that out nationally, to encourage more states to do that. That's why I put together the bill on safe harbor, and Senator Heitkamp has been such a champion of that bill, along with other law enforcement measures. We went to Mexico together to look at, with Cindy McCain, John McCain's wife, who's a leader on this, to go down there to figure out the relationship with the U.S. But I would just end with, I think people in North Dakota know this for what you're seeing on the oil patch and other places, is that this isn't just about victims from foreign countries. 80% of the victims in the U.S. are from the U.S. And so that's why we need to pass some stronger laws to take this on ourselves.
During the testimony at Homeland Security, these women started talking about the lives of the women that were in the process of being rescued or recovered from this trauma. And she talked about a young girl who had been violated 40 times in a very short period of time. And she talked about family members basically saying, it's time for a long weekend in North Dakota. What a long weekend in North Dakota meant is that you're going to get in the car and we're going to sell you for a weekend and then bring you back to Minneapolis. And so I think anyone who thinks this isn't happening is wrong, and we can only look at things like back pages and look at what's being advertised and the code words for advertising someone underage. I mean, they're clearly there and it's clearly happening. And it used to be with prostitution, if you were going to have an opportunity to buy a prostitute, you went down to where they hung out on the street corner. That's not the model anymore. It's become invisible to law enforcement, and because of things like back pages and other kinds of classified ads that get run, people have this sense of invisibility that we need to pierce that as well. And that's one of the things Amy and I have been talking about is what's the next steps after Safe Harbor? What are the next things that we should be doing that would be more preventative? And really, I think, get to the heart of changing the culture of this country.